Hello, Namaskaram, Sat Sri Akal, Jai Jinendra, and Vande Mataram, everyone. Sarvebhyo Namaha. Welcome to Karma Kshetra. Thank you for joining me today. Uh, the topic of today's monologue is 2022 Roundup. How did Canadian Hindus spend 2022? So the year has just gone past. This is the first week uh, of the year 2023. So I thought it would be a good time to just review uh, how did the year went by, the past year went by for the Hindu community in Canada. Um, there have been many incidents that happened uh, where the community like, came together, responded, and to various things. Uh, so we'll discuss a couple of those incidents. We'll understand the challenges, and we'll also talk about like how the community responded, but like towards the end, as the focus will be uh, only be on like what happened rather than like whether the issue was remediated or not, whether there was a solution, because irrespective of that, whatever incident happened, it did happen. So post the incident, what was the action taken and all that, it does matter to some extent. But when here we are in this podcast, I'm focusing on understanding the nature of the problem. uh, so we'll do that, and like what are some of the things that we can do in 2023, so as a community or as like individuals within the community, what are a couple of things that we can do. uh, for the incidents, I'll provide all the links in the description of the podcast. During the podcast, I'll also share my screen occasionally to provide some more details. um, so all right, so I have done what I've done is, for all the incidents that happened in 2022, I've divided them into five categories. So first is like attack on temples, second is attack on our festivals, third is government or slash lawmakers in some cases support to Hindu phobia. uh, Fourth is like schools, and the last is the media. How did media treat the Hindu community? And there are a couple of aspects around that, so we'll discuss them one by one. So let's get started. Okay, so number one is attack on temples. Now, this is like a category on its own, because attack on temples, although it's not a new thing, especially like in North America, um, but Canada, and while there are no specific numbers, and a big reason of that being the reporting of those incidents, attack on temples, but this year there was a lot more uh, uh, incidents that the community saw where a Hindu temple was attacked. So let's uh, let's start with, the first 2 months, that it didn't really start well for the Hindu temples, especially in the Mississauga and Brampton area. And like within first 2 months itself, and within the span of couple of weeks, within those 2 months, there was a series of break-ins and vandalization in Hindu temples. So a lot of many temples were broken in within a couple of days of each other, and that sort of shook the community. It started like and this is like all the major ones which were reported. We don't know like how many went underreported. There are different estimates around that, but it's if we also consider um, uh, even the underreported, not reported ones, it goes into like dozens of temples. So it's first started like in January 15. The report came where Sri Hanuman Mandir in Brampton, witnessed, although unsuccessful, but it witnessed a break in. Um, Following which, within 8 days, in the next week itself, Sri Gauri Shankar Mandir in Brampton was broken into. This time, unfortunately, it was successful, and about 4,000 to 5,000 donation, as per the priest of the temple, that was stolen. Uh, and 2 days later, Mata Chintapurni temple in Brampton was broken into, where about $30,000 cash was stolen. So this was like within few days, and towards the end, on 30th of January, Hindu Heritage Center in Mississauga was broken into, and in this case, it was the individuals broke in and rummaged through the donation boxes and ransacked the main office as well, and like multiple statues of Hindu gods and goddesses were broken as well. So this one was not just about money, um, but even the gods and goddesses, the murtis were broken. And if we and the temple in the statement itself, it mentioned like devotees and priests have been left traumatized with this incident, and very evident, especially because even and not it was not just devotees and priests who were attending temple or who were working at temple. Even the even people outside Toronto, across Canada, were a bit shocked that days after days, such news were kept coming in, and people were like puzzled, like what is happening. So within in the first month itself, there were series of break-ins and vandalization of temples, and which was sort of never heard of before. And there was like a growing insecurity among the community, and people were puzzled like why temples are being deliberately targeted. Uh, if we come to February, again, this did not stop just in January. Even in February, Ram Mandir in Mississauga was broken into on 12th of February, which was, I mean, it was unsuccessful. Luckily, the security alarm went off, and the perpetrators probably left after that. But the very next day, Bharat Mata Mandir in Brampton was also burgled, with thieves escaping with collections in the donation boxes. So the first 2 months itself saw a series of break-ins and vandalization and thefts. And the biggest challenge in this one is getting these incidents recorded as a hate crime. Uh, and this is something which, in this year 2023, the community should really think about, especially the people who have access to the law enforcement, that these crimes should get reported as hate crimes. There were two other major incidents that happened during the year, and I think this one made a lot of news in India as well. So on July 13th, 2022, Mahatma Gandhi statue was vandalized in the Vishnu Mandir in Richmond Hill area. So people who are familiar with the geography of the GTA area, they would know. But for those who are not familiar, Richmond Hill is in the northern suburb of Toronto. Very not that densely populated, probably with Indians. Uh, but it's very close to the 407 highway that people take, and like this temple is very iconic, and it has a beautiful Hanumanji murti outside. It's within the premises, but it's still outside the temple. and that murti is visible from the highway itself, so you cannot really miss it if you are going on 407. um, you can spot it from the highway itself. And here, as you can see, I've shared my screen in this case, and apologies to people who are listening on the audio platforms. um, but I'll try to describe it to the best of my ability. But yeah, as you can see, the statue was vandalized with various graffiti calling him rapist and so on. And in this case, this happened like probably like early in the morning, and the statue was defaced, and graphic words were written. Thankfully, in this case, police was investigating it as a hate crime. uh, and what was even worse that this happened on 13th of July, which was Guru Purnima. So on such an auspicious day, this thing happened, which really shook the community. And if we go by the words of the chairman of the temple, Dr. Budhendra Dubey, um, he mentioned that this has never happened in the past. The community has lived very peacefully in the Richmond Hill area for so many years, and nothing like this has ever happened. And it's very disappointing. And so this was one. Second uh, attack happened in September. So in this case, and I think even this got a lot of media attention, because one of the most iconic temples in North America, I would say. Uh, Let me just share. I'm also trying to. Yeah, okay. I'm not sharing the audio, but this happened around on September, uh, when the BAPS Sri Swaminarayan temple, the entrance gate of the temple was vandalized with graffitis of Hindustan Murdabad. And, as you can see, Hindu was written in big bold letters, and Stan was just tagging along in some small letters. And Hindustan Murdabad, and then Khalistan Zindabad, and as you can see. Um, so this happened around like early morning, um, on 14th of October. And this actually really shook the community, because nobody probably ever thought that such an iconic temple will be a target of such hate crime. And although it's being told as anti-India attack, because and in most of the news it was mentioned as it's an anti-India attack and anti-India graffiti and things like that. But I mean, if it was anti-India, probably the target would have been Indian embassy or some Indian government office. Why they would target a temple, and why they would write, when they wrote Hindustan, they wrote Hindu in big letters. uh, that is sending a signal that it's not about India, it's about Hindus. So temples were subjected to a lot of attacks in the year 2022, and these were like some of the major ones only I'm talking about. um, okay, moving ahead. Apart from temple, there were attacks on festivals, and we have seen of late, uh, even in India. uh, Hindu temples are often the target of people who want to make it about social justice, and uh, many of them like outrightly saying not to celebrate this festival because these festivals are this and that, it is operation, and it is not eco-friendly, and it is this and that. And so our festivals, our deities get attacked. And Canada was not really behind. And I'm saying Canada as a not as people, but within the country. The individuals in Canada um, did not stay behind in targeting our temples, and it is happening in US as well, and even Canada. So across, and probably even Europe as well, we have seen the temples and then festivals are being attacked. So one of the earliest example was when this on July 2nd, Lena Moneymaker, a poet and filmmaker based in Toronto, tweeted, and I quote, "Super thrilled to share the launch of my recent film today at Aga Khan Museum as part of its Rhythms of Canada." And then it provided link, and so along with the tweet, there was an image of a woman dressed as Goddess Kali. She was smoking and depicting her as a smoking woman, and while holding Trishul on one hand, there was an LGBTQ flag in the second hand. Um, so this was another example of how our DTs get used for the personal purpose of whatever social justice war they want to fight. And this did receive a strong reaction, but I don't think this will end right here. This will only increase. So we need to understand that um, our deities will keep getting attacked. And so this was one case where the Hindu deity were appropriated for some social justice purpose of a person. Uh, Following which, um, the Diwali celebrations were also not behind in terms of getting attacked by various entities. And in this case, we'll talk about a couple of examples. So on 24th October, the day of Diwali, um, a Khalistani group descended into a Westwood Mall parking lot in Mississauga to disrupt the Diwali celebration and fireworks by the local Hindu community. So while Hindu community was celebrating the festival, playing music, bursting crackers, and having a good time, there was this group who came and started sloganeering and making obscene gestures to the Hindu community who was there with families, by the way, and one can presume children as well. But that did not stop the group from uh, sloganeering and making obscene gestures. And while one person was probably injured in the standoff, which lasted for about like 1.5 hour, luckily the police came on time and sort of stood between the two groups. What was unfortunate in this incident was the media tried to play it as both sides getting engaged in violence, whereas the fact was one side, which was the Hindu side, was simply celebrating their festival, and the other side came and started sloganeering and trying to pick up a fight. But this did not stop over here. Uh, One of the worst examples, and let me share my screen for this. This The community probably did not even expect, like in their wildest dreams, that something would this like happen. Um, Let me just share. Where is this? This is okay. So on 24th itself, just a couple of hours before this Mississauga incident happened, Environment Canada issued an air quality alert for Toronto and surrounding areas, which stated, and I quote, a special air quality statement is in place due to the possibility of deteriorating air quality as a result of fireworks for Diwali. And this came as a bit of shock for the community, because in this case, like a federal agency, Environment Canada, and a provincial agency, which is Ontario's Ministry of Environment, normally they issue a joint statement in case of Ontario, which warned high levels of air pollution. Uh, and in this case, they targeted the festival of Diwali. Now, why it is wrong? So, air quality statement issuing them is not a uh, rare work. It's not something which they do like once in a year or something. It's a fairly routine job, because air quality deteriorates for many reasons. And but what was peculiar here was that for the first time, air quality statement was issued, mentioning the reason, the festival or whatever, um, the cause of the deterioration of air quality. Uh, because air quality statements gets issued on Canada Day, on Victoria Day, on Labor Day, and many other occasions where there is fireworks. In fact, in Niagara, if you go in the summer, um, every day at 10 o'clock, there are fireworks, which goes about like 10 minutes. There's a lot of smoke around there, and if you look at the data on the air pollution, uh, uh, even for the Brampton region or Mississauga region or Toronto region, air quality deteriorates many times throughout the year, and there are statements issued, but never has Environment Canada specified that air quality statement is in place due to possibility of deteriorating air condition or air quality as a result of, let's say, Canada Day fireworks or Labor Day fireworks. So this was a bit of shock, although they retracted the statement, but the damage was already done. And many like prominent personalities and common people pointed that out, and uh, it was retracted later on. Um, so this sort of came as a bit of surprise for the community, that for the first time, like, government is getting into uh, maligning the Hindu festival. So this was on, yeah, attack on festivals. uh, and towards the end of the year, uh, uh, in November 2022, as the for those who don't know, in November 2022, it was Canada's first countrywide Hindu Heritage Month celebrated. So earlier in the year, one of the MPs, Chandra Arya ji, he proposed a bill in Parliament, which was unanimously voted, and the bill basically mentioned that the month of November across Canada should be celebrated as Hindu Heritage Month, recognizing the contribution of Hindus to the prosperity of the country. And while this was going on, uh, Khalistanis placed posters across Mississauga and Brampton insinuating that Hindus killed an 8 days old Sikh infant. And these posters were across, lawns and public places and neighborhood, including like gurdwaras and a lot more around gurdwaras. So like the message, of course, left out the basis of the riots, and instead focused on representing Hindu community as a violent, mob that is killing children, just like that, just because they are Sikhs, or just because, and no um, anything, any mention. So this was basically caricaturing the entire community and creating an impression that Hindu community is dangerous, and you should look out for your children. So this was around targeting. So, or even though like now Hindu Heritage Month is not exactly a festival in the sense of Hindu culture, but in a way it is a festival because it celebrates the Hindu heritage and culture. So that is like the reason I've included this in as in another festivals category. So anything which celebrates Hindu faith is being targeted. Uh, Now moving on, the third category I picked up some examples was for where the government came in support of Hindu phobia. Now, in during when we were discussing festivals, we did discuss about the Environment Canada and the air quality warning that was issued, which singled out Diwali. So that is like one example we already saw. But apart from that, there were a couple of other examples where the government took actions which harmed the community more. Uh, One of the example was on September 28, 2022, when a five-member council of a township of Puslinch. So, people who are again familiar with the geography of around Toronto, so there's a city called Kitchener, which is about 1 hour from Toronto, and in the west, and close to that, there's a township of Puslinch. Uh, and so on 28th of September, the five-member council uh, uh, changed the name of a private road in the township, which was called Swastika Trail. And this name has been there for decades, even before Second World War. And but there was a sustained campaign to change its name to something else, and in this case it became Holy Trail now. But the Swastika Trail, the basis for name change was that swastika is a symbol of evil. Swastika name represents Nazis, and it's offensive to Jews. And so there was this proposal which was placed in front of the council. It went up for vote. It was voted yes by all members except one, the mayor of township, and based on majority, the name change was achieved, and it was approved by council. And so this was like one case where, and even those like one thing is with respect to Hindus, what swastika represent, but swastika is a name which has been in North America even before uh, Second World War, and uh, even like the symbol has been used by the First Nations of Canada as well. So, and Canada as well as US. So there was as such there was no really basis to get the name changed because the name represents um, good faith, good luck, and it's a symbol of new beginnings. So uh, one would expect government to take into consideration the overall um, faith of all communities into consideration before doing that. The second example where we saw government uh, ge- getting into Hinduphobia was when in October 2022, uh, the MP Blake Descharles decided to participate in conference that attacked Hinduism. And let me share my screen for this actually. Uh, yeah. Okay, where this? Okay. So in this case, On October 26, 2022, Justice for All Canada, which calls itself a non-profit global human rights advocacy group, basically organized a conference under the name, and I quote, like exporting Hindutva threats and violence into the West, and which featured multiple speakers. But what's the most troubling is, like, if you go through the name, the rest of the names are pretty much uh, usual suspects. But what was disturbing was the MP from Edmonton uh, was also a part of this. And as you can see, the poster also tries to highlight that, oh, we are not anti-Hindu, we are anti-Hindutva, which was precisely the trope thrown before the dismantling global Hindutva conference. If you remember, even before the conference, there was constant chatter that we are not against Hinduism, we are against Hindutva, and we are against the political ideology. But come the conference, the day one itself, the speakers started mentioning that there is no Hindutva without Hinduism, and Hinduism is inseparable from Hindutva. And in fact, the speakers went on to say that it will be incorrect and dangerous to separate Hinduism and Hindutva. So basically, by the end of day three, it was very clear that they are about. And in fact, there was a question entertained which said that why not destroy Hinduism itself. So these type of conferences happening, but in this case, probably it was the first time where a lawmaker was a part of this conference. And if you see, like, the introduction of the conference, it mentioned help, and I quote, help us make a difference by learning and promoting awareness about this issue. Join an expert roundtable on the rise in violence perpetrated by RSS wings and its affiliates in the Western nations, Canada and Western nations. So the description itself mentioned, the introduction itself uh, created this conspiracy theory that somehow the violence is perpetrated in Canada and Western nations by RSS and its, in quotes, I would say, affiliates, whatever that means, in Canada. So over the last couple of years, this has increased. That there's some kind of import from India to the Western nations about some kind of extremism, which has never really, which we don't see on the ground, but it is there. Which we don't see ever in police reports, but it is there. There have been number of organizations that are banned by Western countries. None of them are Hindu, but it is still there. So this trope uh, um, gets thrown time and again, and this was like one of the example. Now the fallout of this was that uh, the MP, which was mentioned in this conference, which was scheduled to be a part of this conference, 5 days earlier in the parliament, he presented a petition E3981, which was initiated by the executive director of Justice for All Canada. And the MP said, and I quote, thank you very much, Speaker. And I have two petitions to present on behalf of Canadians. One petition is in regards to ensuring that we acknowledge that the Indian government's discriminatory anti minority laws, the rising threat of genocide against Muslims, and the persecution of Christians, Dalits, and other minorities in India. Additionally, we want to include human rights experts in all trade and bilateral agreements with India to safeguard the freedom, justice, and human rights for persecuted minorities there. So this petition furthered the misinformation campaign that supposedly majoritarian Hindu government is being anti-minority. Of course, no facts were presented to support these statements, and no facts to say what is this rising threat, what exactly is happening on the ground, which can be said as a rising threat of genocide, because this genocide probe has been going on for a couple of years, and it's always like impending genocide, on the brink of genocide. If you look at the titles which are given, or the whenever it is used in the article, it's always the brink of genocide, or threat of impending genocide. It's always impending, it's always on the brink. It's always like, yeah, it's just 5 minutes away, just on the crossroad, it's just, taking a turn, it's waiting for the signal to turn green. So, and I can tell you, like, even 5 years after, it will be the same tone. It will be an impending genocide, it will be on the verge of genocide, on the brink of genocide. The same words will get used. So this is like the example of where, government uh, sort of enabled Hinduphobia. The one last example I'll take is of Mississauga city. Now, in this case, uh, what happened was, on 6th November 2022, the second Khalistan referendum of the year, I would say, because every year there's some referendum going on anywhere. But this referendum happened in Paul Coffee Arena in Mississauga. Now, the thing about this arena is that is a government-owned facility, which means the maintenance and everything about the facility is using public money, which includes the Hindu uh, people's money, Hindus' money. The Hindus who are living in Mississauga, they are also, through the taxes, they're providing money for the maintenance of the arena, and then the city goes out and gives the arena to for the referendum. And the publicity of the referendum targeted Hindu community as infant killers, and it also received support from NDP leaders, especially the Hagmeet Singh. So these were like a couple of examples where we see that government also, supports. And we saw, like, in 2021, towards the end, in December, Toronto Public Library uh, had supported Hinduphobia by giving platform to Christopher Jaffrelot, who is a known Hinduphobe. So these were like a couple of examples with respect to government. Moving on to the schools. So the year saw a couple of examples where, and most of these are not really in the public domain, because except for one, I think, which came out. But I'll just share a few of them. So, yeah, okay. So in one of the first cases, there's this book called Complete Canadian Curriculum, which is not a main like textbook, but it's sort of a supplemental exercise. And so what is happening in the books is the way the Hindu faith gets depicted is more often than not problematic. And what is surprising it is, this is not these cases are not coming too often, because I'm very sure, like, wherever the Hindu faith gets represented in North America, it is not really respectful. Unfortunately, my hypothesis is that parents are not paying attention to what is being taught, because, or if they are paying attention and they know, they are just ignoring it, saying that okay, let the kid focus, let's not muddy the waters, if I'm using the phrase right. But I don't know, for some reason These things are not coming in the public domain, which is sort of problematic. But if I give an example, so there's this book called Complete Canadian Curriculum, which includes like math, science, social studies, and English. It provided as a part of social studies, there is an explanation of different faiths and all that. But in this case, it provided a very grave and hateful misrepresentation of Hindu faith. So let me just share the screen. So in this case, I'll just, yeah, actually, yeah, just provide an example which will give you a better idea of what exactly I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay. So as you can see in one of the exercises, and this is a grade 4 book. So your 9-year-old kid, probably 9 or 10-year-old kid, is learning this, because even though it's a supplemental exercise, it's a popular book. I've seen it in a couple of houses. So uh, it's not a rare book, or it's not really not popular book. So as you can see, like one of the exercises, it shows a picture of dark sari clad woman, whom they call for some reason medieval Indian woman, and she is saying, and I quote, "I belong to the Sudra caste. My family is very poor. I do not receive an education. I am a servant in a priest's house. I prepare the meals, take care of the kids, and clean the house. My parents found me a husband in the same caste. My work is harder now because I also have to take care of my husband, my children, and my house. I don't have any rights. I'm not allowed to go anywhere or do anything I like. I can never move up to a higher caste." And just below that, they show what they call today's woman, with a picture of a white and a black girl saying, and I quote, "We are friends in the university. After graduation, we chose the fields we'd like to work in, and now we have our own careers. We married the men we love. We share with our husbands the responsibilities of taking care of our kids and household chores. We work hard and we now enjoy a better quality of life. We can afford going to a family trip every year. We like having gatherings and going to movies together when we have spare time." So now think about this, a 9-year-old Hindu kid, and I'll come to the other kids as well, but like a 9-year-old Hindu kid, what impression does he carry? Number one, it's showing dark skinned, sari clad woman, and she's being tagged as medieval Indian woman. And so what will he or she think about, let's say, dark skinned women in Canada, Hindu women? And what if they themselves are dark skinned? And unfortunately, what, and this is so much problematic, I cannot even, I mean, I'm having a tough time describing it as well. You're confusing the skin color with the caste in a geography where it's not really prevalent. And and this confuses, this is what to confuse kids, because if that kid is also is dark skin, the first thing which will come to his mind, oh, do I belong to Sudra caste, or do I belong to some other caste? What is my caste? And incidents have happened where kids come back to home and then ask about their caste, when it's not even a point of discussion anyway. So this is one. And then secondly, they're saying, I am a servant in a priest's house. So next time the kid sees any priest, the first impression comes to the kid's mind, oh, he has a servant. The servant will be of Sudra caste. And assuming that priest is somehow oppressive. And this is what happens where, people, and if the person comes to know, let's say, based on the caste, uh, the government enforced caste system which we have in India, If the person belongs to Brahmin caste, they will automatically internalize that I'm a oppressor and I'm oppressing the people from Sudra caste. Whereas, you know, it's possible that the father of that kid had worked odd jobs in Canada, at gas stations or grocery stores, or hotels or motels. And they worked through their way through. They toiled so hard just to be able to afford, a decent living. And then their kid starts thinking, oh, my parents are oppressive. So think about like what impression does it leave on kid, and then think about like what impression does it leave on other kids about the Hindu faith. That certain people in Hindu faith are oppressive, and in this case maybe the lighter skinned Hindus are inherently oppressive and the dark skinned Hindus are inherently oppressed, and without any evidence. So this was a highly problematic thing in the book. And this was probably not the only example. This was just one example. If you scan through the books, and I would encourage parents to do that, uh, see what your kids are learning and find out if there's something problematic over there. The second example was in one of the high schools where um, uh, while teaching about India's history, uh, in one of the social studies teacher in a high school in Calgary, they mentioned in the presentation. So this was a presentation. This was not a textbook. It was presentation which was prepared by the teacher. And in one of the slides, when they were talking about Mahatma Gandhi, it was mentioned that in 1948, Gandhi was assassinated by a Hindu extremist who believed that Gandhi had weakened India. So, and following which, in slide 23 of the same presentation, the teacher also wrote that, and I quote, like Pakistan wanted residents of Kashmir to vote on whether to join India or Pakistan, but India claimed that Kashmir had already decided to remain part of India. So, in the first case, you're using the word Hindu extremist when it was a political assassination, and which has happened across the world, even including Canada. But we don't hear the word Christian extremist or Catholic extremist or Orthodox extremist whenever there's an assassination of any political, non political leader. Even when teaching 9/11 to kids, the schools in North America take great care to ensure that it is not linked with religion. And in some way, like rightly so, because to the kids, you don't want, you have to be, especially at a school level, you have to be little sensitive. And so, why is that sensitivity not extended to Hindu kids? And in the second slide, the teacher completely ignores its positions India as aggressor, ignoring all the seven exoduses of Kashmiri Hindus in the Kashmir Valley in the last couple of centuries. Like three of them, like post 1947, with the latest one being as recent as 1990. And when the teacher asserts that Pakistan wanted residents of Kashmir to vote, the teacher also ignored that there were three conditions for the plebiscite that the UN Resolution 47 stated, with of which the first condition was for Pakistan's administration to withdraw its forces from the occupied region, something which was never done. And today, that occupied region is known as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So, leaving out key messages, key facts to give a particular messaging is exactly what bias is. Now, coming to the last example, in when it comes to school, um, in October 4, we saw the Aylesbury Public School, which is in Brampton, provided an assignment to grade 7 students regarding Khalistan. The assignment was titled Khalistan Referendum Response. The assignment provided a couple of links for the students to refer, which included a Pakistani newspaper for some reason. The assignment had uh, also had like a couple of questions. Uh, Number one, like being, should the Canadian government have attempted to halt the Khalistan referendum political protest in Brampton? Why or why not? Number two, like, does the Khalistani vote qualify as hate speech? And number three, was India's response to the protest a fair reaction? Why or why not? So luckily this was like retracted, and uh, um, so this was resolved, but this is again an indication and that what kind of uh, brainwashing can happen, and Hindu phobia, how it can project. So there are like three areas which we saw in these three examples. Like one is the book. In this case it was supplemental, but it can very well be a textbook. In second case it was the teacher themselves preparing the material for the students to teach in the class. And third is the assignment which they are provided. So your textbook might not be biased, but there can always be assignments which can be biased. So these are like a couple of examples of what happens in the schools. uh, okay, so last we will now touch upon the media, and after that we'll wrap up. Sorry, for some reason I just need water today while speaking. uh, okay, cool. So moving on to media, I'll actually, yeah, in this case I'll share the examples of the incidents. So the first, uh, on so this was on 1st of April, ironically. um, Toronto Star, which is a Canadian English language broadsheet daily newspaper, they published an opinion piece in uh, okay, and let me just share. So they published an opinion piece on Kashmir Files. Now we have seen that Kashmir Files was one movie that received a lot of backlash, especially from the media in North America, both US, Canada, and in fact Europe as well. Uh, so Toronto Star basically uh, went on a rampage with the new movie. It was an opinion piece which titled Anti Muslim Film, The Kashmir Files, a dangerous step in India's descent into hate. So, like, yeah, for some reason, this movie is uh, pushing India into, and when you say dangerous step, it's basically, it's basically giving an impression that it's leapfrogging into a hate, of course, without any evidence. And so the article declares the movie is based on like the distortion of uh, events, and as you can see, like uh, it also labels movie as the gobble-worthy piece of malevolent filmmaking, and on many occasions. So across the article, you can see it basically talks about how this is Nazi, closing closest to Nazi propaganda without any evidence. And towards the end, it basically says, let me find yeah. And how can any article on India, a Hindu phobic article, can finish without mentioning genocide? So towards the end, it says that the movie, in this case, the movie offers frightening glimpse into the path of division and hate the Modi government has embarked the country on. It insists the atrocities against Hindu Kashmiri Hindus amount to genocide. So this is the first statement where it says that atrocities, okay, yeah, something happened against Kashmiri Hindus, amount to genocide. And when it says it insists, which means that Toronto Star doesn't believe that. So amount like atrocities against Kashmiri Hindus is not really genocide. In reality, it's the movie itself that is priming the country to support genocide against Muslims. So again, we see the dog whistle of genocide, which has been happening for so many years. For some reason, that genocide never really comes. I don't know. Probably it's like slower than the government itself. So, so it's one thing like to deny genocide, but the article goes beyond it. It means beyond, above and beyond, to basically flip it and say that actually the genocide is happening the other way. So this was Toronto Star. Another example I would uh, uh, is from the CBC. So in this case, uh, on April 7, 2022, CBC published uh, an article, and let me just share that. again. Yeah. So CBC publishes an article which says hate speech and death threats Canadian academics harassed after criticizing Hindu nationalism in India. So in this case, CBC, for people who don't know, is a public broadcaster in Canada and a federal crown corporation that receives funding from the government. So they produce a hit job, and the article claims quote unquote harassment to the professors if it does not provide any examples. The article describes Hindutva as, and I quote, the right wing political ideology and a modern political ideology that advocates for Hindu supremacy, whatever that means, and seeks to transform India, a secular democracy, into an ethno religious country, whatever that means. Ethno religious. So, what ethnicity and what religion will it be? And like, how are they defining it? How did they reach a conclusion? Of course, they don't have to explain anything. So the article also claims, and this is the more dangerous part, that Indian diaspora, and in this case, because it's in Canada, it's the Canadian Indian diaspora, exported fascism and Nazism. So let me just. So it's like, yeah. Uh, and the article also claims that the Canadian Hindu extremist groups often create seemingly benign cultural organizations and use them to promote far right views. So actually, it was right there, no? Yeah. So in first, they say the RSS was founded on the principle of fascism and similar to Nazism. So fascism is equal to Nazism, and exported abroad by Indian diaspora. And then it goes the Canadian Hindu extremist groups, doesn't name the groups, whatever they are, often create seemingly benign cultural organizations and use them to promote far right views. So the idea is basically paint all Hindu groups as, or especially the cultural organizations, as Hindu extremist groups, and then link it to the far right, because you see, the moment you link anything to far right, it's sort of touch me not in case of Canada, in case of US as well, but Canada is a little notch above when in doing that. So, and the article like also mentions that there are, factually hate groups, like as you can see, but of course doesn't produce any facts. And it describes, and this was the funny bit, like when it goes on to describe dismantling global Hindutva as um trying to find again where that was, as an online conference on contemporary Indian politics. Just yeah, supporting an online last September. So in September, it was dismantling global Hindutva. So the conference, which advocated for annihilation of Hindu faith, was a innocent online conference on contemporary Indian politics. Uh, of course, and the article also like goes on to deny Hindu phobia on like two occasions by alleging that anything, under the pretext of Upala Krishna, the director of Dwarpalkas, believing that the article mentions they believe that anything critical of Hinduism is Hindu phobia, which is definitely not true. If you go to the Understanding Hindu Phobia website, there's an elaborate definition of Hindu phobia. So, unfortunately, uh, when you become a part of such big group like CBC and like other major news channels, there's a certain amount of entitlement one feels, and I am getting a sense of that with many of these authors or other reporters, that they don't really understand uh, what they are talking about, but they want to express the authority into, and like this is one example where they're saying that when they're stretching it to the other extreme, when in fact Hindu phobia is a very well mentioned and explained definition. uh, but the article basically denies Hindu phobia, and then the second occasion is where they are conflating Hindu phobia with anti-white racism. So yeah, so the title of that section itself, the criticism called Hindu phobia, and it goes into saying that Hindu phobia, the researcher likens the Hindu phobia to the concept of anti-white racism. So Hindus in Canada, which make less than 2% of the population, cannot uh, talk about Hindu phobia because Hindus in India are more than 80%. And that is again like it's a questionable number. It would be less than 80%, but let's say around 80% or three quarters. So, how is that getting applied to Canada is something which I don't know who will be able to explain because the researcher here clearly hasn't. Another and the last two examples was around the CBC again in May 2022. Uh, CBC published an article which mentioned like how prejudice rooted in ancient social system has migrated from India to Canada. So again, you can see the theme where the constant allegation is something bad from India is getting uh, moved to Canada, and this is happening in case of US as well. That Hindus are bringing something really bad from India to your country. So this, while riles up the left, it also riles up the right, who are anti-immigration. So it's like hitting two birds with one arrow or bullet or whatever that means. So in this case, like the article talked about the caste system that manifests in Canada, and it basically talked about the article claims that the Hindu caste system divides people into four subcommittees communities based on the ancestry and can be identified by the last name, and the four caste is further divided into 3,000 caste and 25,000 subcaste, which is clearly a misrepresentation of Hindu society's social structure, and like alleging a well debunked lie that the last name of person is indicative of the caste of the person. The article also claims that the caste tradition transcends religion. It's like parroting, the Hindu phobic narrative that Hindu faith is responsible for the social inequalities present in other religions. So, and the article also had like comments from different professors, and including Shailja Krishnamurti, who was also a part of uh, 2021 Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference, which like openly asked for destroying the Hindu faith itself. Now, the last example here is of the pointer, which is relatively a small publication now, but on December 16, 2022, the reporter from Pointer writes an article titled "Us Canadians Are Not a Threat to You." Let me just share. So, yeah, this was an article which was written title "Us Canadians Are Not a Threat to You. Are Old World Conflicts Behind the Ugly Outcry Against a New Mosque Proposal in Brampton?" So, again, like the title itself uh, tries to say that, Hindus are bringing something, and as you read the article, but basically something really bad is coming from the old world. I don't know what exactly like the old world they mean, but basically something ugly is coming from that part of the world into our beautiful nation of Canada. So again, it starts off with that. Uh, so the main, like the story of the article is around the proposal to build a mosque in East Brampton, but there was some opposition, which always happens with any new proposal. That there'll be some people who will have some who will be affected negatively by it. There might be some genuine concerns, there might be some fears which can be resolved through a dialogue. But in this case, the author like went above and beyond to paint an entire community with a negative light. And I'll say this article is Hinduphobic on multiple counts. Number one, it does racial profiling of the delegates. So at one place, as you can see, it says, scrolling down the long list of delegates signed up to speak during the planning meeting, the vast majority of names had one thing in common: they are Hindu. And uh, and the people will not remember the vast majority. People will only remember they are Hindu among the long list of delegates. And in fact, it goes on to sort of put a target behind anyone with the name Patel. So giving an impression, and like Patel, people in North America, across North America, know people that Patel is a Hindu community and who has been economically successful. And so uh, anybody would understand the kind of message that the reporter wants to send. Secondly, it furthered the allegation of dual loyalty, which is like painting Canadian Hindus as right wing and sympathizers of nationalism in India. So, like as you can see, using words like ethno nationalist, BJP government, right wing Hindu nationalist sympathizers, things like that, and giving an impression that Canadian Hindus are right wing, and they won't be loyal to Canada even if they're Canadian citizens, and they are you know want to build uh, Hindu supremacism in Canada as well. And apart from that, the use of words like organized conspiracy, so, or rather not the word per se, but here we can say what it mentions now, Hindus in Brampton appear to have organized against the approval. So this basically gives starts a conspiracy theory that there is an organized conspiracy against the new mosque location by Hindus in Brampton. So from fringe or like some Hindus, it goes into, all Hindus have to appear organized. And even in earlier para, you can see opposition of Hindu Canadians towards various Islamic based regional cultural efforts impedes diverse Muslim communities have become more common in recent years. So a couple of examples like this is basically giving uh, an impression that, there's an organized conspiracy, and then squarely blaming Hindus on the fringe and animosities between the communities. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier as well, the anti-immigration conspiracy that, local issues, calling local issues as imports from foreign countries by immigrants. So some of these examples uh, across the article were very problematic. Okay, so these were some of the examples from the media point of view, and I'll stop the screen share now. But okay, so I don't want to just paint the very bad picture that everything is going down and it's going, um, everything is just going south and there's no way out. Um, Throughout these examples, while we have not discussed in detail, but the Hindu community response was there in many cases. The reaching out to concerned authorities. However, I would feel that, the temples have been holding back from speaking out, and that is one thing which needs to improve. Uh, Overall, it's the response has been more reactive than proactive, more like putting out fires. So the important thing would be that going forward, we are more proactive. We reach out before anything happens and make sure that the concerns of the communities are heard. Uh, there was support from a handful of MPs, um, but not belonging to any one party. So that is very important that, uh, and irrespective of which party the MP belongs in your area, it's important that they, and MPs here do listen, and at least most of them. And the good thing is there are efforts to getting, more favorable political discourse. Like Hindus are finally realizing the value of their votes, especially in thinly populated country like Canada, and not just about federal but even provincial or local municipal elections, where the victory margins are a couple of hundred of votes in many cases. So Hindus need to realize the value of the vote, and it is improving, but yeah, definitely more can be done. Now, going forward, like there will be four uh, fronts to focus. One, I think, uh, lawmakers needs to be, reached out. Now lawmakers, because, ultimately they are careful about their votes. They want to make sure that they win the next election as well. And so there are four like those, that is like one front which we can focus. Second is law enforcement. um, Third is school boards, and fourth is like universities and media. And I'm putting universities and media at the last because the major reason is that these two institutions are highly ideological, especially in the current uh, scenario. And getting them to change will be a mammoth effort. uh, but we can start with areas where there's less effort, then there's more chance of getting better results, which is in case of lawmakers, law enforcement, and school boards. And what do we ask in 2023? One is there should be a formal recognition of Hindu phobia in policies, bylaws. I think that is very important. Second is like categorization of incidents under hate crimes. So this will require outreach to law enforcement agencies and sensitizing them about the issues of the community, the things that concerns the communities, which are things that are affecting the community negatively, things like that. And the third is like encouraging the community, especially temples, to use and ensure like formal reporting of the incidents, because that is one big fallback when uh, if we don't know the incident has happened, especially the larger community, uh, then it becomes very difficult to prove the point. Uh, and the final thing I would say before wrapping up is for some organizations, especially like Hindu organizations, like talking about Hindu phobia or swastika is not political. And I'm adding swastika here because I personally had an experience where somebody said, "Oh, we don't want to get political." Talking about swastika is not political, or talking about Hindu phobia is also not political. We are not, when I mean, for one reason, we are not getting targeted by a political party. So it's if when the attacks are apolitical, the voice raising your voice against those attacks will also be apolitical, right? So one thing we need to get out of our head, especially the Hindu organizations, the cultural organizations, temples, that talking about Hindu phobia won't be is not political. Okay. So with that, I am ending today's episode. Do let me know your thoughts, critique in the comment section. If you have listened so far, I appreciate it. If you like the content, please press the like button and subscribe the channel, and press the bell icon as well. If you are on YouTube, uh, this will help me get encouragement to produce more such content for you. This is Karmak Kshetra signing off. Jai Somnath.